All right, welcome to the EnviroHouse webinar. Today we're talking about electric vehicles. We have Janda and Sarah with us today. My name's Gator. I work with the Enviro Challengers. And I'm here with the City of Tacoma. So we're going to give people a few moments to get in here. And then we will begin our presentation, or Sarah's presentation on electric vehicles. Give you a few moments there. And while we're getting started here, I see we're starting to get some attendees showing up, so good, thank you, welcome. My name's Gator, as I said, and I'm gonna go over a few things really quick, a couple technical things just in case you're new to this, or if you forgot what happens, or if you just need a refresher course, or if you take your cursor with your mouse or your finger and you hover over your screen, you should see a Q&A button at the bottom and a chat button at the bottom. Now, I'll bring up the chat, and I'm going to be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can enter them in the Q&A or the chat feature. You may notice that you are muted and no video for you. That's just how we do it for security regulations. And if that just happens automatically. So I'll be here in the background checking out, making sure everybody's working okay. So like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. If you want to chat, you can add to all participants or panelists, to all panelists and attendees. I recommend you put that in there. I'll type something in there, hello. Also, we have a poll that we will do from time to time that'll come up during the presentation. And I'll show you what that looks like right now. And I encourage you to answer the poll. It starts, and this first one's gonna be how you've heard about us today for this workshop. So here's the poll and what it looks like. And if you take a look, and I'll give you a couple seconds, 30 seconds to get in there and start voting or answering the question. And as people come in, welcome as you join in. I just want to know how you heard about us. Maybe it was Facebook, email list, workshop website, workplace email, family or friends, TPU, or other. Looks like we got about 60%. There we go, a few more people. I'll give you about, 30 seconds more. Okay. Excellent, we got about 80%. I'm gonna go ahead and end polling in about 10 seconds. So get your answers in. How did you hear about us? In 3, that's not it. 3, 2, and 1. All right, so let's take a look at those. We'll see that you can interact through the polling. We'll ask questions throughout the workshop, and you can answer through there. Again, you can do the Q&A or through the chat. All right, I'm going to close that and stop sharing. Okay, this is my first time doing it, so bear with me. Okay, before we get too far into me talking, because this isn't about me, I'm going to turn it over to Janda and Sarah. So Janda, you can take over for me, and good luck, everybody. I'm here if you need me.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. And I wish you were at the EnviroHouse, and I wish I was there too. And hopefully we will be in another few months. But from now through the rest of the year, we will continue doing our workshops virtually. We won't be having as many, but we will still be doing probably close to one a week. So hopefully you will be able to follow us and attend some others in the future. So we're doing electric vehicles today, and we will do that again in November. Sarah will share that with you at the end of the program, Wednesday, November 18th, if you have friends that want to see this again. We are recording it, and it will be available, although not right immediately, but it will be available so people can replay this one. Our next virtual workshop, our webinar, will be Wednesday, September 16th. We'll be doing composting from 4 to 5 p.m. And that link for registering will be going out on the EnviroNews listserv, and we'll try to get it out on some other sources too. And then following that, we will be doing a webinar on September 23rd, Wednesday from 4 to 5 p.m. And that one will be on shade trees. So lots of good information in both of these coming up. We are scheduling in through November up until the week before Thanksgiving. So Look forward to seeing you all here again, and I will turn this over to Sarah to get started with our webinar, and she will self-introduce. So, Sarah?
Hi, thank you, Janda. My name is Sarah Sweet, as you heard, and I work for Tacoma Power in the Energy Research and Development Group. I do a lot of education outreach for electric vehicles, and I also help develop programs. So quick plug, our group is getting ready to launch a couple of pilot programs, one for multifamily electric vehicle chargers and to install them. So there's funding for that, and another one to install public charging at businesses. So we have funding for both of those. So if you know anyone, let them know. And just to let you know a little bit about my background, I have a master's in environmental sciences, so from Evergreen State College. So I do tell people I am definitely a hippie at heart. I care very much about the environment, but at the same time, I want to always make sure that it's practical and we're looking at good solutions. So it really aligns well with my work at Tacoma Power, and I'm so happy to be here talking to you about electric vehicles today. So thank you for joining me. And I'll just say real quick, usually when I do these, it's kind of a nice conversation. You can jump in with questions at any time. And with virtual, it's a little bit harder. So Gator's going to monitor that chat, and Gator, just so you know, feel free to interrupt me and jump in and let me know if you have a question that has come up. All right. So let's see, get this going. There we go. So first, I'd like to start with a quick poll, just a question to kind of get a feel for the virtual room. Where are you in your electric vehicle purchasing journey or your electric vehicle journey as a whole?
Give this a few seconds. Don't forget to answer. Go Gooey Ducks, by the way. That was the hat I was wearing before this, so.
Go Gooey Ducks.
All right, looks like we have about 70%. If everyone will make sure you vote, please. Where are you on the electric vehicle? Okay, I'm gonna count it down in 3, 2, and 1. Let's take a look at those results. Boom.
Currently owned. We always get some current owners in this. I love when we have current owners in these workshops because everybody has their own experiences and advice. So if you have some thoughts, feel free to chime in the chat. It's really great to hear from current owners as well. And then driven and do not own. And then highest is you're interested in buying in the next 1 to 2 years. Perfect. This should be the workshop for you then. All right. For some reason, it always has a moment. It's always slow to start after a poll. There we go. Okay. So I wanted to just start by saying that electric vehicles are not a new concept. A lot of people have this idea that they are, brand new, untested technology, but they've been around a long time. So here's just some ads from electric cars from the 1900s. This Baker electric car, I love the ad because it's actually using some of the same benefits that we still talk about today with electric vehicles, the silent car. And here, I don't know if you can read it, but it says it eliminates chains and chain troubles. So we don't have chains in our cars these days necessarily, but we do have lots of moving parts in gas vehicles. And electric cars, I'll talk about this more, have a lot less parts. So it also eliminates a lot of those problems. And Henry Ford, saw this too. He said he believed that the electric car or electric automobile would be the family carriage of the future back in 1914. So they've been around for a while. So now why drive an EV? First and foremost, no tailpipe emissions. I think that's what brings a lot of people initially to electric vehicles, their initial interest in it. So of course, they're charged by electricity. There's no fuel burned in them. And they're actually less expensive to fuel and maintain than gas and oil. So that's a common misnomer. It's frequently thought that it's far more expensive, but it's far less expensive. I'll dive into that a little bit as well. It's also quick, quiet, and fun. Super zippy, 100% torque right away, and super quiet. Like it's the smoothest, quietest ride you'll ever have. And something I don't have up on here, but another interesting thing to think about is they actually, they help national security because the electricity has to be produced at home locally, and that's your fuel. You're not relying on oil. So that's an interesting benefit too to think about. Fossil fuel transportation on the other side, they do generate greenhouse gases, and that has been shown to exacerbate climate change. They're actually very inefficient. Gas vehicles, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's like 30 to 40% efficient because so much of the energy used from burning gas is lost as heat energy because, you know, as you know, an internal combustion engine, it's creating little mini explosions. So huge amount of energy is wasted that way. Electric vehicles, on the flip side, their efficiency is like in the 90s percentile. So it's far more efficient than gas. And then, you know, gas vehicles do produce runoffs like oil going to waterways. Here in the Puget Sound, it's near and dear to our hearts. So we always have to watch what goes in the waterways. And I mentioned the national security issues with oil, oftentimes foreign oil. And the other thing I'll mention too is right here in the city of Tacoma, greenhouse gas emissions from transportation is the largest chunk of our greenhouse gas emissions in the city. So by reducing that, that's the most benefit we can have if we want to reduce our carbon footprint in the city as a whole. Now there's lots of different electric vehicle types. There's the full battery electric vehicles, such as this Nissan Leaf I have in the picture here. There's the plug-in hybrid vehicle. Now what that means is it has essentially a gas engine and an electric motor, and you can plug it in, and it has a smaller battery, and you can run fully on electric if you need to, if you want to, but then it does have the gas as a backup. Then there is the extended range electric vehicle. So this uses, it's kind of like a generator that's included in the car, so that will recharge the battery, and they're often marketed as like a range extender. So the BMW is an example of one that has that as an option. Then there's the full hybrid vehicle. So these are the ones that have kind of become more popular with the Prius in recent years. So that's a lot of people, that's like the gateway, the gateway to electric vehicles. But these do not plug in at all. They just run on gas. They just use it more efficiently because it's coupled with a battery. So now for the purposes of today's workshop, we will only be focusing on battery electric vehicles, full electric. So what about cost? This often is the first question. Electric vehicles are often thought to be a car for rich people. People think they're just too expensive for me, maybe someday. But I'm here to tell you that they're not necessarily that expensive. You can get used electric vehicles for under $10,000. That is still a lot to a lot of people. But they're becoming more affordable all the time with the secondary market, the used market. So as more and more models come out, people will be upgrading and then putting their old electric vehicles on the market, so they become available for the rest of us, which is really great. So I just found 3 examples here of EVs just in the area that didn't have a bazillion miles on them that were under 10,000.
We have a quick question that kind of relates to this, especially since used. John wants to know, if not covered in this presentation, what current incentives are there for local, state, national, and purchasing EVs? And you might be getting to that, but my curiosity does stem to, does that cover used electric ones as well? So
yes, it does. And I will talk about in a little bit, I'll just give you a sneak preview. I'll talk about actually, it's in the next slide. You guys are so good. You read my mind. So first there is the Washington state sales tax exemption. And the great thing about this is it was reinstated last year. We lost it for a little bit. It was reinstated last year to now cover used electric vehicles as well, which is just fantastic. So you can kind of see here the breakdowns of what you get. It is going to step down over the years, but this first bulk is until 2021. And then I think, I'm trying to look for the used. Oh, down here at the bottom, for qualified used vehicle purchases leased between August 1st, 2019 and July 31st, there was a sales tax exemption up to $16,000. So, and I believe at the end of this presentation, I have a link to more information about this, because it's best to just go straight to the main website for this to find out more, because I'm definitely not the expert on the ins and outs of this. But the Washington State, I think it's the Department of Revenue is the link. So I will show you at the end. And there's also a federal tax credit. So this is only on new electric vehicles, but but it's still available for many cars. So this one is interesting because it's based on how many have been sold in the US, and then it steps down. So it starts at 7,500 and then it goes down from there. So this is a screenshot from our website, and the button here that says federal tax credit, that'll take you to the IRS website that kind of explains how to do it on your taxes. But I did it when I got my car, and it was pretty straightforward. And then the view eligible vehicles, you definitely want to go to that to see if the car you're interested in buying is eligible and for how much of a tax credit. Because if that's a major reason for you going EV, you definitely want to know that ahead of time. All right. So the other question is often about fuel cost. You know, I get this question a lot, is like, okay, great, I'll save money on gas, but then isn't my electric bill going to go through the roof? So it's actually not going to go up that much, which is really great news. And I can tell you, and so this is a great example here. This is again from our website. If we have time, I'll demo this tool because it's a pretty fun one. But I also include the link at the end of this presentation that will be emailed to everyone afterwards. But this shows how far will $3 take you. And so on a gas car right now, it'll take you about 24 miles, and that's estimating 24 miles a gallon. On an electric car, it'll take you 115 miles on average. So that actually equates to 3 cents a mile in your electric vehicle. So if you just do a quick estimate of how much do you usually drive in a month, multiply it by 3 cents per mile, that should give you a rough estimate of how much your electric bill will go up per month. If you're a Tacoma Power customer and you do bi-monthly billing, of course, double that. Oh, sounds like we have another question.
We do. Someone wants to know, does the federal tax credit apply to plug-in hybrids and or regular hybrids as well?
Plug-in hybrids, it does. And I'm not sure about regular hybrids because honestly, I haven't checked that, to be completely honest with you. But it may, because I think it's like a clean fuel credit, so I'm not positive, but you'll need to look. But it does for plug-in hybrids for sure. I know that. I've checked that. So where was I? Oh, so I'll just tell you from experience with my car. When I got it, it went up like maybe, I think the most I ever pay is like 25 bucks a month for my electric fuel. Of course, now I'm not driving much with COVID, so now I've only charged my car like 3 times since March, but it's extremely affordable. So another way to think about it is this is a really cool tool called Egallon. This is from energy.gov. And so you plug in the state and then it'll show you a gallon of gas, the cost in your state, and then the average electricity cost for that state to kind of show you. And I'll just, so if you can see here, it's $2.73 a gallon for gas. And so that would be the equivalent of paying 90 cents a gallon. So for your electricity. And I will just mention that Tacoma Power's rates are lower than the state average. So it'd actually be even less for us, which is great. So the other thing I mentioned earlier about eliminates chain and chain troubles from 1914. So there's less parts, there's way less parts. So there's no oil changes in an electric car. There's no serpentine belt. I have had a gas car with a serpentine belt that went out. It was terrible. It costs tons of money. I don't recommend it to anyone. So it's not an issue with an electric car. There's no spark plugs. There's no transmission, no gas tank, no exhaust. I will mention here real quick because we are getting some questions about plug-in hybrids. With plug-in hybrids, you don't get this benefit because it does need a gas motor or gas engine to run that part of the car. So then you have gas and electric combined. So you don't get as many benefits. So just to summarize cost of ownership, the new EVs can be more expensive than gas cars in some cases, not all, but there are tax credits and the Washington State sales tax exemption to bring down the cost greatly. They really help. Used EVs are definitely available and more all the time. And there's no oil changes, no maintenance. I can tell you I've had my car for, 2 years now because I got it in September of 2018. So it's almost my electric vehicle anniversary. And all I have done is add air in the tires, and I should probably change my windshield wipers. That's all I've done in 2 years. So that's been nice. Only costs you about $20 a month in electric fuel. And for the average commuter, And there's no gas, you're not paying gas prices or gas sales tax, but be aware there is a Washington state tax of $225 a year that helps offset for, oops, sorry, I had a pop up that distracted me. So there is, so when you go to re-register your car, there's an extra tax on there, and it helps, you know, maintain the roads and whatnot, because they are losing that with the gas taxes. So I get it. I understand we do need to pay for our roads and our infrastructure. But it's still, you know, paying that $225 in one chunk, that's still a lot less than I would have paid in gas taxes. So I'm okay with it and all the maintenance and everything. Ooh. There we go. All right, so what about charging? Any questions on that last section before we move on?
Yeah, let me take a look here really quickly.
Sure.
First of all, I'd like to say that $225 for a tax. I drive a Land Cruiser because I have a lot of kids and a lot of family, so we need the bigger car. That's about what it seems like to fill up my rig in a month. So yeah, so the question I have, water quality benefits such as no vehicle leaks, no spills at the gas pump, and no more atmospheric deposition from the vehicle exhaust. I'm wondering if you have any data on this information. So is that something we can start tracking now, that we're actually helping work with the water quality and the offset?
I guess I would need to know the question, because one, I mean, it doesn't have any of those fluids in the car, so you don't really need data to track that because it doesn't exist. It doesn't happen. But I'm not sure if maybe you're asking if, as more EVs are adopted, if there's a measurable positive impact on water quality. It sounds like
I would think that's a little bit more accurate. Is the
okay.
Can we see any efficacy of not having leaks in the in the spills? Is that really affecting our water quality in a positive?
So I have seen, I don't know that I've seen research specifically on that, because honestly, I don't know that the EV adoption rate is high enough yet, but I have seen lots of research on what is going into the water from gas cars and what that's causing. So a colleague of mine actually did this huge research project on brake dust going into the water. And I'll say with EVs is an interesting thing, because you do still have brakes, yes. However, you have why am I blanking on the term right now? The brakes will actually, the motor itself will actually, or regenerative braking. Thank you. Took a minute for my brain to start.
I was trying to figure it out for you.
Yes, they have regenerative braking. So the motor itself will actually slow down the car rather than using your brake pads, and that energy will go back into the battery and help recharge your car a little bit. So it's fantastic when you're going down hills on a big trip, because you can, like really big hills, you can actually watch it go up, and sometimes you'll see it go up a percentage, which is really fun because it's free energy. And so you're not using your brake pads through all that. So brake pads actually last if people are using the regenerative braking, which it is already in there to a certain amount, but you can actually usually set it so it'll be even higher. Like I have a setting on my car where it'll fully bring the car to a full stop. So I can actually just let my foot off not the gas, the accelerator, and it will slow to a complete stop just with the regenerative braking, and I'm not using my brake pads at all. So there's actually even less brake dust going into the water from that. And there's copper and all kinds of stuff in there we don't want. But then with gas cars, there's oil, there's transmission fluid, there's all kinds of stuff. And I know there's a lot of research on that stuff going into the water and what that's causing for sure.
I will take this moment real quick. If you could share that brake dust, I don't know where that will be available, if that's possible, but I will say at this point, there were some people who joined us late. So I want to let them know that this is being recorded, and you'll be able to get a link later, and you'll be able to watch this whole thing from the beginning and all that sort of stuff. And so we can go ahead. I guess you're ready to go. What about charging? So you can start that.
So it sounds like, did I hear that right, that someone wanted to see like some information or research on stuff?
Yeah, if you could point them to the data, at least maybe they could help fund, figure out their own answers to some of those questions.
Okay, let me see if I can find something. Sorry, just jotting it down.
No problem. They thank you for that. So
yeah. I love these kind of questions because then I get to learn things too. Because then I get to go find, because it's stuff I read a long time ago, so I can't like remember what the titles of the articles were, research papers were at this point, but I know I can dig some more up.
That's
Okay.
perfect. I do have a company car, an Enviro Challenger vehicle, and it has the regenerative braking, and it is kind of fun to see how much, like, oh, it went up to 48% or 60. So it is fun to, you know, it's been equated to driving like a video game almost, where you get all these little pop-ups and stuff. So.
You get really funny with, like, I'll do everything I can to save energy in my car, like eco mode and regenerative braking, and it'll show me like how much I've gotten. And it'll be like, oh, on average, you're paying this much per mile. And then it'll be like, oh, and then if you take away all this other stuff you did, it's this much. And sometimes it'll go down like 1 penny. And I'm so excited that I got it down 1 penny, which is silly in the grand scheme of things. But, you know, every penny counts. All right. So first, I just want to start with a super brief overview of what people may have heard levels, and what is levels, level of charging. So level 1 is you just use a standard outlet. So every electric vehicle should come with a level 1 charger. So it literally just plugs into a regular old outlet from your house. So when I first got my car, I was renting, so I couldn't install a charger or anything. But I realized I only lived 3 miles away from work, so I didn't really need faster charging because, you know, the outlet was fine, even though it's a lot slower. So you could have an EV and just have a regular old plug. Be aware it could take up to, depending on the size of your battery, it could take up to 24 hours to fully charge. So that's really important to keep in mind and plan ahead if you have a longer trip. I would plug my car in. It couldn't fully charge in one night. It would take like 1.5 nights. So if I had a long trip, I needed to just plan ahead. And then the next is level 2 charging. So that's 240 volt. You can do it at home.
Quick interruption here, I'm sorry.
Oh, sure.
Kyla has a question. Does anyone who has an EV and lives in an apartment have recommendations for charging if your building doesn't have a charging station? It's kind of what you were addressing there. I guess you just have to have a long enough extension cord. Is that what, or can you take it out and charge it? Or
Yeah, so there's lots of public charging, and I'll talk about public charging a little bit. And yeah, if anyone in the chat has dealt with that situation, please chime in. That would be awesome. There's public charging. There's even some places that offer free public charging if you look hard enough. But I'll show you kind of some resources later to find public charging. I wouldn't recommend necessarily running it out of a window. I've definitely seen people do that, but that can cause safety issues. It can cause trip hazards. So it's not necessarily the best way to do it. Also, there's sometimes workplace charging available. So, you know, if your employer doesn't already offer it, maybe you could start asking them for it. So there's resources out there, and we do have public charging at Tacoma Power, at Tacoma Public Utilities. So you can come visit us and plug your car in to charge. So, so back to what I was on level 2 charging. So 240 volts. That is actually the same plug that you would use for like a stove. So I actually brought my charger in from the garage, and it looks like this, the level 2 plug charger, the little 4-prong. And I actually have an adapter so I can plug it into just a regular old outlet if I want to as well. So that started that way. And as I mentioned, these are also used for public chargers. So this is what, whoop, there we go. This is what the part that plugs into your car looks like. And every electric vehicle in North America uses this. This is a J1772, has a terrible name, but it is the standard for level 2 charging. So your car likely will come with that. If not, you can buy them online. And you can also choose to hardwire in a charger in your home if you want to. You don't necessarily need to. I recently was fortunate enough to buy a house this last November, and I just had them wire in a plug. So I could just use a charger I already had and just plug it on in. And it's nice because then you can use that plug for other things if you need to as well. I think welders also use the same plug. Then the next one is level 3 charging, or DCFC, so DC fast charging. This is 480 volts. It's commercial grade power service, is not available for home use. It's too much electricity. It doesn't go to homes. These are really great for trips when you just need to stop and they will actually charge your car 80% full in about 30 minutes. I've taken my car to Portland and back multiple times. My car only has a range of 150 miles, so I do have to stop once on my way there and once on my way back. But yeah, it's kind of nice. Usually I'll just go and stop, and it'll be like my dinner break while I'm waiting for my car to charge, and then I'm good to go.
We have another comment in the chat that's asking about long-term. We could be working towards building codes that require EV charging be built in new buildings and retrofitted in older ones. And I've been in a few meetings at Office of Environmental Policy and Services, OEPS, about requiring new buildings to have, and I'm not an expert on this, but to have charging station capabilities right off the bat, because they know it's cheaper in the future to retrofit. So I don't know if you can speak to that really quickly.
I can. There actually is a City of Tacoma code for new buildings, and it's dependent on how many parking spaces they have. And I don't have the notes in front of me, but I think it's like if they have X amount of spaces, then every 10 spaces, 2 have to be ready for EV charging. So say they have 100 spaces, then 20% of those have to have EV charging or be ready for charging. So that means they have to lay the conduit, they have to label the power box so that you know which ones are for that. And the reason they're doing that is because it is much cheaper, like Gator mentioned. So it's far more cost effective to lay the conduit and get the electricity to the parking spaces before you lay all the cement and everything. Because later on, if you have to trench and bury conduit and run that out, that is very, very, very expensive. So it's not necessarily to put in charging, but it is to prepare for it. Because then once the electricity is there, it's not too much more to just add the chargers. All right. So charging ports. I started talking about this with my example. So quick overview of charging ports. As I mentioned, this one here, I don't know, can you guys see my cursor? I'm not sure if you can. So the first one
I see it, so yeah.
Okay. So this first one here is, like I said, J1772. This is the standard level 2 charging. You can also use it for level 1 charging. This is the part that goes into your car. Then there is the CCS system. So it's combined right here. Here it's called J1772 double. And I believe like the BMW i3 is an example that uses it. Chevy uses it. So this can be used for the fast charging we talked about for those cars. Then there's CHAdeMO. This is also used for fast charging, and this is used by Kia, Nissan, Mitsubishi, and Toyota. And then there's Tesla. Tesla's special. They have their own charger. It's used for fast charging and for level 2 and level 1 charging. But they do have an adapter. Tesla has an adapter, so you can use other chargers. However, other cars cannot use Tesla chargers, so that's good to know. And I'll mention, and so when you're looking for public charging, that's just something you have to keep in mind. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide, apparently. So here's just some examples of public charging that is available around town and a little bit beyond Tacoma. So you see the green ones are for level 2 charging, the orange ones are fast charging. There's lots of mobile apps, and there are websites that will help you find this charging. Our website actually has a find a charger section that can help you search for these. And a lot of them offer a filter, so you can filter out what kind of charger you're looking for. So like me, I have a Nissan Leaf. So if I need a fast charger, level 2, I don't need to filter because it's all the same for all the cars. But if I need a fast charger, I need CHAdeMO. So I can filter by CHAdeMO and kind of plan my trip that way. And oh, a lot of these too I'll mention will show the cost, not all, but a lot of them will show the cost to charge at that station. So that's a nice thing too to have a heads up on. Because
is there a minimum, sorry, this is just me asking, but is there a minimum like amount you can charge, or can you just, because you know, I've been there, my 83 cents of gas that I need just to get home, is there some kind of minimum, or like, can I go get I need $1 to get home and that's all I can afford right now? Is that?
Yeah, I will say it depends on the charger, because some of them are set up, like some of them, The challenge right now with public charging is there isn't really standardization. So some of them charge by the kilowatt, some charge by minute, some charge by the hour, some charge by 5-hour blocks or multiple hour blocks. So for example, if you were to plug in, so our chargers at TPU, I'll use an example. They charge $2 for 5 hours, which is very, very low for any other chargers in the region. You pay $2 no matter what, because that is for $2 for 5 hours. So whether you're plugged in for 5 minutes or 5 hours is $2. Other places it may be per hour. So it's like, okay, well, you plugged in for 15 minutes, but you pay for the hour. So just keep that in mind. So by kilowatt would probably be the most accurate, but a lot of them have like a parking fee. Some of them, I would say some of them have a parking fee. I've seen that more common in Seattle. Haven't really seen that here. So it's a little bit like the Wild West right now with public charging, because there isn't standardization and the prices are kind of all over, but it's not too terribly different. So I would say the one exception is fast charging tends to be more expensive because you are paying for that convenience. But I will say, I do know the infrastructure is very, very expensive. So I can understand why they have to charge a little bit more. And if you're going on a trip, there's lots of charging on the way. So this is an example of the West Coast Electric Highway. They are trying to get charging all down the West Coast, and now they're starting to move into Eastern Washington. And the I-5 right now, I think their goal was a charger every 50 miles, because the idea is even an EV with the smallest range, which 50 miles is kind of like the minimum these days, or usually much, much higher, can still make this trip, right? So you can go all the way from Canada down to the southern tip of California. So it goes all the way down. And so I have used these chargers. It's great. Okay, second poll. Well, before we get into ranges, how far do you drive on a typical trip?
I'll put that up here. Everyone vote. On average, how far do you drive on a typical car trip? Go ahead and vote now. And I'm putting a link to the Electric Highway website on the chat, just so everyone can have it. Those are fascinating things for me. Give you about 15 more seconds to answer the poll if you haven't already. And it's about 75% of the people have come in. And all right, here we go. I'm going to end polling in 3, 2, 1. All right, let's look at those results.
All right, 5 miles or less. This is pretty typical. That's kind of the average. 6 to 10 miles is 14%. Oh, and 11 to 15 is 29. All right, I just remembered everyone can see this, so I'm reading them off. 16, 20, 14%. Okay, so pretty evenly split, but it looks like we're right between 5 or 11 to 15. Those are the highest. So I have good news for you. Every single one of you could use an EV, could drive an EV. Totally doable. And range is getting better. So I've had a lot of people say, I actually had one person tell me once, I'm not getting an EV until the range is 500 miles. And my question was, do you drive 500 miles a day? Because that's a lot. And that even if you drove 500 miles a day, that would mean you charge once. So that's not typical. My car has a range of 150, and back before COVID times when I was driving normal life, I charged like once a week, maybe twice if I drove a whole time. But as I said, it's getting better and better. So the 2020 Chevy Bolt has a range of 259 miles. Nissan Leaf has 226. Tesla Model 3 has 322. So they're definitely getting up there.
I was going to add that it seems like one of the biggest problems with fossil fuel vehicles is that short trips. Like your car is not as efficient when you're stop and go traffic in the in the cities, and so if you're only doing these short trips, these are perfect for it. But if the long trips, your fuel efficient car, your fossil fuel car is still going to be more efficient than it is in the city. So 500 miles sounds good, but you don't need it.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too that you just brought up, Gator, because electric vehicles are, so it's when you talk about efficiency, we always know about city driving and highway driving, it's flip-flopped for electric vehicles. You're actually more efficient, you get better range in city driving because of stop and go traffic and the regenerative braking. So I've been stuck in terrible stop and go traffic on my way to Seattle or on my way back from Seattle. It was actually pretty great. Like I felt like my range hardly went down at all because we were stopping and going so much. I was constantly regenerating that electricity. So that was, you know, it's interesting that it's flip-flopped. You got to think about that. So just quick samples. These are not all of the electric vehicles available on the market today, but here's a good sampling to just kind of show you the range. So as I mentioned, 50 miles is kind of like the bare minimum. This is the smart car, the little teeny tiny ones. Since they're teeny tiny, they only have room for a teeny tiny battery. So their range is right around 60 miles. And then you go, you know, mid-range, so Chevy Bolt, Nissan Leaf, these are more like the consumer mid-range price, mid-range battery. So that's, you know, 150 to 200 miles. Then you get all the way up. Of course, Tesla is still at the top with well over 300 miles for pretty much all of their models at this point. So what impacts battery ranges? We kind of talked about traffic a little bit. So one of our, so in my group, one of our team members actually recently did some research on this, and we have an EV charging study going on right now. So we pulled a lot of data from that. And also the group that we're working with to analyze that data has a lot of national data. So we got a bunch of data from that too. So we got a really good sampling of data about battery range impacts. We found some interesting things. So very little capacity is lost in the first few years. And then there's about an average of 2% lost overall per year. So we'll talk about battery, what happens with a battery after it dies. But right now with, I won't say current battery technology, but previous EV battery technology, because they're only just now starting to die, is about 10 years is what they were seeing. So that's kind of a 2% loss each year until it's like, hey, you really kind of want a new battery. But the battery chemistry is getting better and better all the time and more efficient. So they expect that they'll last far longer in the future. And let's see. Oh, and so some things we found that affect this. Temperature extremes. So our mild climate in Washington, good news, is really good for EVs because super hot weather, super cold can be rough on the battery. Fast charging does heat up the battery. This is kind of stuff that's been known for a while too. So it's just interesting to see this confirmed right here in our region. Fast charging does heat up the battery, so that can wear on it over time. But I have also seen some other studies that have said it's not quite degrading it as fast as they thought it did. But it does affect it. So really only use that fast charging when you need it. Don't rely on it for your daily use. And then charging when the battery is cold adds stress. So it's best to plug it in like right when you get home or right when you finish a drive. Letting the battery get very low or always charging to 100% isn't good for it. So I will give you a tip. This goes for all of your lithium-ion battery stuff like laptops and phones. So it's not good to just top it off. It's not good for the battery, and it's not good to let it get super low. I would recommend when you charge your EV, just charge it when you need to. Don't plug it in every single night because you don't really need that, and that can be kind of bad on the battery. Lithium-ion battery is like a muscle, it needs to be exercised. If you're only using part of it, then only that part gets exercised, and then the rest of it's kind of going to wither away. So the interesting thing though is most manufacturers set upper and lower limits. So the common recommendation you'll see in EV groups is keep your battery between 20 and 80%. However, a lot of manufacturers actually are already keeping you between 20 and 80%, but what you see on your console is 0 or 100. So it seems to be a pretty common thing. So I wouldn't stress too much about it. Like I charge my car when it gets below 20, like right when it gets below 20, I'm like, okay, I'm going to charge it up. But I'll charge it to 100%. Like I'm not going to just keep it between 80. Like I'm going to make it work for my life. Don't stress too much about it. And as I mentioned, newer EV battery technology is getting better all the time. So they do expect it to last longer. So what about environmental impact? So first of all, the electricity itself here in Tacoma Power Service territory, at least, is very clean. We're 90% carbon free. We're working to be cleaner all the time. All of the electricity we produced is hydropower. And we have a lot of wind power in our portfolio as well. And then the battery end of life. So this is a common question too. Okay, so when the battery dies, what happens to it? Because that kind of is the most environmentally impactful thing about an electric vehicle. So one thing is that they can be recycled first and foremost, and it makes sense to do so because those are valuable elements in that battery. However, before they're recycled, they actually have another 8 to 10 years of useful life as energy storage. So just because it's not so great for your range or for your horsepower for your car anymore, doesn't mean it's not still useful. So there's actually a whole bunch of pilots going on right now. So BMW, Hyundai, and Nissan have all started pilots to use their used EV batteries as storage. And they're partnering with utilities where they're kind of reducing peak demand. So electric utilities have to constantly kind of manage and make sure we are providing you guys enough electricity at all times. So there are times when here's the electricity you're producing and oops, there's a spike in how much is needed, and we have to figure out how to cover that. So what they're doing is charging up these batteries when not a lot of electricity is needed, but we have lots being produced. So this happens a lot with wind power because there's a lot of wind that gets produced at night. So that could be stored, and then it could be used the next day when we have that spike and we need that instant electricity. So that's a really cool use for this. So where do you go from here? Do your research for sure. Someone already asked me for some research. That is fantastic. Research anything that you still have questions about. A great place to start is our website. We have a lot of information. You can kind of see an example here. We have our EV charging study I mentioned. We have EV events you can attend, well, virtually right now. And we have just a quick overview of EV benefits. We have EV FAQs, savings calculator, carbon reduction, EV sales tax credits that I mentioned, and then the find a charger section. So, and then we have this little video on the main page that is actually me talking about a lot of the things you've heard about tonight. So our second to last poll, what programs could Tacoma Power offer that could help you get an EV, that would help you bring down any barrier getting an EV?
And I'll get this poll up here. So please take your time, or well, please vote. It is interesting. I was thinking about you talk about all the different charging stations throughout the West Coast right now. And I know in some places in Europe, they have loops, like they were going to put stations all across Europe and all this. So there's a lot more infrastructure being created, which is fantastic. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have a few more minutes, about a few more seconds here. We have about 85% voting, so get your votes in. Vote early, vote often, right? Isn't that what they say? Oh, just kidding.
Yes. So interesting thing you mentioned about putting in more charging infrastructure, because I saw a study recently that said more public charging infrastructure helps the adoption of EVs, even if they aren't used, just because it's the psychological comfort just to know they're there. Which I found fascinating because we talked about range a little bit and range anxiety. People always hear about that. And the funny thing about range anxiety is once you get an EV, it goes away. Because after about a week of using it, you realize like, oh, this isn't hard. Like this is actually really easy. I plug it at home. It's easier than a gas car.
Right. Now that is a concern. Do people run out of electricity out there on the road? I imagine on a long trip, it's a more likely.
Oh.
But you get out to your car, is the chance that it's going to be dead is not really there anymore, is it? Like
oh, it totally froze for a second.
Oh.
But you were talking about running out of electricity.
Yeah. I was thinking if you go to the grocery store and you come out and your car doesn't start, like, the likelihood of an EV not having drained while you're at the store is very low, right?
Yeah, it's not going to drain while you're parked, unless you're parked for like months. But even then,
Yeah.
So I've been pleasantly surprised because I mentioned I've only charged my car 3 times. I actually just called my insurance company and I'm like, you know what? I'm not going anywhere. Can I get a discount? And I have this app that tracks my driving habits, right? So I get a discount and it keeps giving me warnings that no trips have been logged. And so there must be something wrong. And I called them and I said, that data is real. I have not gone anywhere. So, I mean, I went, I think like 2 months when the lockdown first started without driving, and my car went down by like, I was 100% when it started, and I checked in my app and it had gone down like 1%.
Wow.
It was at 99. I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool.
Right.
So I would say I would not worry about running out of electricity because you get so many warnings. It's just like, you know, you're not going to forget to fill your car with gas, your gas car, because you can see a tank, you know how low it's getting, you get a warning light. EVs almost give you even more than that. You can see the battery level, you get warnings, and it will give you progressively more desperate warnings.
All right, let's take a look at this poll. Yeah, warning, danger, Will Robinson. Here's the poll, and let's take a look.
All right, rebate to help for home charging installation. All right, lower electric weight while charging late at night. Discount, okay. Utility-owned public charging network. Okay, thank you. I'll see what I can do about that. But this is why we asked. All right, so as I mentioned, I have resources for you. This is gonna be emailed to you later, so you should be clickable or you can copy paste. So here's our main TPU website. Here's the savings calculator I showed you guys a clip of that showed you like the actual money costs. Then there's the carbon calculator. This is something I just added, the 2020 Electric Vehicle Guide by Fourth Mobility. It is geared towards Oregon State, so you'll see it says like, oh, Oregon rebate available, but it's a really good overview of just all the models that are currently out there. Gives you some beautiful pictures and really short descriptions and like what the range is, just kind of what you want to know to pique your interest and learn more. Here's a link for the tax credit eligibility. So it's fueleconomy.gov. The Washington state sales tax exemption, so that's Department of Revenue. And just general information. There's some great information about using electricity as a fuel at energy.gov and some more helpful tools at energy.gov. And of course, my email. So if you have other questions, feel free to reach out to me and I would be happy to respond. And then just so you guys know, we do have some upcoming, if you have friends or family that miss this workshop or you want to bring someone to the next one, we have another one Wednesday, November 18th from 4 to 5 p.m. And then we usually have ride and drive events. We can't do that in person this year. So this year we're going to do a virtual National Drive Electric Week event on October 3rd, Saturday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Final poll.
All right, here's this. Go ahead.
I was gonna say final poll and then any questions that you guys might have.
Now, I will say that you mentioned the upcoming events. Don't forget, this is being recorded, so we will send links out eventually, and you can share those, I think, with your friends and whatnot. So here's our last question. Is there anything Sarah did not cover that you will still have questions about? How well did this virtual workshop format work for you? Once again, my name, if you like this presentation, my name's Gator. If not, my name is Bob, and my email is bob@cityoftacoma. Just kidding. Let's see, a few more seconds. We'll get some more people to please vote. Any poll questions? Okay, as soon as we're done here, I'm gonna give you about 20 more seconds. A few more people need to vote. You can do it. There we go. All right, let's take a look. There you go.
All right, great. No other questions. I'm glad to hear the format's working well. I've been really enjoying these. It's fun to talk to other people besides just my coworkers and family.
Why don't we bring in Janda here, since she's the EnviroHouse webinar person. So Janda, why don't you go ahead and come on back. Oops, unmute there. And you guys can wrap this up.
Yeah, and yeah, and if there's any final questions, jump in. I'm happy to stay a little late if needed, or you can email me.
I think my video is still unavailable.
I can take care of that. Again, I'm
Okay,
learning this too. There you are.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so I just wanted to remind people to check with us about future workshop webinars. And if you're not a member of the EnviroNews listserv, I can send you information on that. You can email me at ehouse@cityoftacoma.org. We have how-to videos on a number of topics on YouTube. You can find those by searching EnviroHouse how-to playlist. And we have about 6 or 7 more videos, webinars already planned, and about 4 or 5 more in the works that we are hoping to do yet before the end of the year. So thanks again for joining us, and hope that we get to see you in the future. And thanks to Gator, you did a great job for your first time.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for joining us and bringing us this information. I think it's an amazing thing. I do love my work car. It's a hybrid though. It's fun to check all the stats. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us, and please do keep checking in for future webinars and EnviroHouse opportunities to meet in this format and try other subjects. Composting is next week, so is it next week, Janice? Sorry.
Next week, Wednesday.
Next week. And that's with John, right?
Yep.
And me.
You and John.
That'll be a fun one. So.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody.